Thanks, Wayne. Good morning, everyone. You just saw a few pictures of people from various points of time in Basin's history. Here's another photo, and one that some of you may find a bit amusing. Obviously, a bit of stress and strain over the years. In all seriousness, and I apologize in advance, I'm battling a cold. Obviously, one shouldn't clean water tanks when it's 25 degrees outside. But again, in all seriousness, had you told me 30 plus years ago when I started my career at Basin Electric that there'd be a point in time when I'd be delivering the financial address at Basin Electric's annual meeting, I'm not so sure I ever would have believed you. But I'm honored and humbled to have the position that I hold, and I want you to know I take the management of Basin Electric's financial matters very seriously. I obviously, along with Paul and members of the senior management team and a lot of the people that work for us, have a direct connection to rural America. We were raised on farms, so I can't emphasize enough that you need to be fully aware that every action that we take and every decision that we make, how we understand that that has a direct impact on you and ultimately that person at the end of the line, because in many instances, we still have that connection to the person at the end of the line. Over the course of the next several minutes, I want to take a look at some specific transactions or projects that we've worked on over the course of the year and then do a deeper dive into each of those projects or transactions. Now let's start with our annual audit, and this process starts in September of each year when representatives from Deloitte come to Bismarck, meet with management and the board of directors to discuss the audit plan for the upcoming audit. That occurs again in September. Also in September, there's a bit of preliminary field work that's done by the auditors. This is followed up with 2 weeks of field work in December. And then in the month of February, basically the whole team that's assigned to the Basin Electric audit comes to Bismarck and spends the entire month reviewing our records, transactions, and so on and so forth. Our goal, as always, is to receive an unqualified opinion. And in order to achieve that goal, we need to ensure that we have the proper accounting for all transactions, be they either book or tax. Once again, I'm pleased to announce that, as always, not unlike any other year, we received a clean opinion. The annual report for 2016 was mailed in late April. By now, I'm certain most all of you have seen a copy of it, but in the event that you haven't, there are copies available at the registration desk for your review. In addition to a complete set of financial statements and the associated footnotes, there's also the auditor's opinion, a financial narrative, and a narrative on all projects and operational activities at the cooperative. Let's now turn our focus on weather and its impacts on our financials. Now, it's unfortunate, but a fair amount of our financial success, at least on the utility side of the business, is directly related to weather. In the winter, when it's bitterly cold and we've had wind saturation for a few days, we generally see an uptick in sales. So in January, for example, our sales were greater than budget. But obviously, there's a flip side of that. Many of you were incurring additional expense as you were, heating your homes or your machine shops or your businesses. And then, of course, we had the other extreme. We had July's extended period of hot and dry weather that led to significant margins because of increased electricity sales for irrigation and cooling. But again, we saw the other side of the coin. Where irrigation was unavailable, crops were shriveling in the fields, and farmers were being forced to call their herds. We have a family friend who is coming up probably on 40 years of working at a local livestock auction, and at its peak in July, this individual, over the course of 2 days, spent over 36 hours penning and sorting cattle. Personally, we had carryover in our pastures from last year, but as this drought lingered, we were wondering if we were going to have enough grass to get us through the season. Now, fortunately for us, the rains came, and for that we're very thankful. But the bottom line is, while higher electricity sales due to extreme weather patterns are good for Basin Electric as a whole, we wish the offsetting effects weren't a factor in that. Now we'll move to a couple of transactions. The first is a transaction that took place in April, where we secured $500 million of fixed long-term debt. The proceeds were used for two primary purposes. The one was to replenish general funds that had been used over the course of the last year or two for the construction of the gas-fired units and the transmission facilities in northwest North Dakota. The remainder was used as a portion to finance the urea project. In this case, the money was borrowed by Basin Electric and lent to DGC under the revolving credit agreement that exists between those two entities. Prior to the launch of this transaction, we held a series of telephone calls over the course of 2 days where we touched approximately 60 potential investors. On the day of the launch of the transaction, we had $1.1 billion of subscriptions or offers, so more than 2 times oversubscribed. That's important to note because it continues to show that there's very strong interest in the investor community in the Basin Electric credit. This particular financing has a bullet maturity of 30 years, so this is Basin Electric's longest dated debt. The maturity of this financing is 2047. At the end of the day, we ended up with 58 total investors, 96% who are either insurance companies or asset managers. Some names that you may recognize are Metropolitan Life, Pacific Life, Allstate, and Vanguard. As of September 30th, we had approximately $4.6 billion of long-term debt outstanding at a weighted average interest rate of 4.53%. Our next transaction is what we refer to as an amend and extend of a revolving credit facility. This facility was initially put into place in December of 2014. In June, we upsized that facility from $50 million to $100 million and extended the maturity of this facility to June 30th of 2020. The amounts, the dollars that are drawn under this facility are also an integral part of the financing for the urea project. Another project that we work on that spans several months and takes hours and hours and hours of staff time is the preparation of our annual long-range financial forecast. The foundation and the groundwork for that forecast is with commodity prices. This past year we used 3 entities. We took a blend of those 3 price projections and used that in this case as our basis for our natural gas prices. We use entities that are quote-unquote experts in the field and who specialize in the forecasting of natural gas and crude products and their associated byproducts. In this case, even the experts have a difference of opinion as to what future gas prices will be. As you can see, there's a wide divergence, especially in the front end of the curve, on their view of natural gas prices. But then as we take a look at WTI, you can see that there's still that divergence, but that entity that was very bearish on natural gas prices has become very bullish on crude prices going forward. Once we've determined what these prices will be and how we'll use those in the financial forecast, we share that information then with marketing and asset management who uses it in determination of the revenues for byproduct sales. Information is shared with cooperative planning in the use of their generation runs. In other words, determining how much energy will be coming from our coal baseload units versus what will be coming from our natural gas units. We also share this information with our partners at CFO, and they use that in the calculation of their diesel prices. For an entity that burns approximately 8 million gallons of diesel fuel a year, even a modest change in diesel prices can have an impact on the cost of coal. And finally, we share that information with our fuels and transportation group, who uses it in the calculation for the cost of coal. So again, it's a project that starts in February and March with the gathering of the price data and works its way through July, when we share that information with the board and then take it to the Manager's Advisory Committee and finally come back to the board in August for approval. The results of our last financial forecast show that we'll have a net after-tax consolidated margin of somewhere in that mid-$70 million range. That's the consolidated margin that we need, that we believe we need to stay firmly in the A category as determined by the rating agencies. As we then move and speak to the rating agencies, the last action that the rating agencies took on the Basin Electric credit was in the spring and early summer of last year. After reviewing our rather meager 2015 results and then looking at our projections of our then current financial forecast, two of the entities downgraded the Basin Electric credit, while all three rating agencies changed their outlook in one fashion or another. In addition to changing the long-term rating, which Moody's changed our long-term rating, they also changed our short-term rating, and this impacts the interest rate that we receive on the commercial paper that we issue into the short-term market. Let's now hear from Bill McKim from Midland Power on the importance of a financially strong Basin Electric.
The Basin, down to my distribution co-op, we're a family, and I really believe that we need to focus on vertical success of all the organizations. And for my distribution co-op and serving our members, we need a strong Basin. And I think vice versa, Basin needs strong distribution systems. So Basin taking the steps, and I think that Paul and Steve and the team have worked very hard and continue to work hard on bringing financial stability to Basin. I think will have benefits for my co-op down the line.
Over the course of the last couple of years, we've been formally visiting with the rating agencies at least twice a year, and then follow that up with intermittent phone calls. There's just been so much activity and so many changes. We think it's important to keep the rating agencies fully apprised of the activities at Basin Electric. Our last visits with all the agencies took place in September. Just prior to the September board meeting, the representatives from Fitch actually traveled to North Dakota. They came in on a Tuesday. We spent that evening with them, went through a rating agency presentation. The following morning, they met with the board, discussed the Basin Electric credit in specific, and then talked about the cooperative energy sector in general. Once they were done with that meeting, we traveled to Beulah, where we toured the Synfuels plant and the Freya mine. And from there we traveled to northwest North Dakota so they could get a sense of the activity in and around Williston. We're very much appreciative when folks come to North Dakota and tour our facilities, and they're very much appreciative once they get here. As Matt Riley, the individual on the far right, who's a relatively new analyst assigned to the Basin account, said at the end of the day, he said, I could have looked at the pictures and I could have heard the story, but I wouldn't have had nearly the appreciation for the complexity of the credit as I do now after seeing the integration of the mine, AVS, and DGC. Then we spent a good portion of the week of September 25th in New York meeting with the other two rating agencies, as well as providing an investor update call. This is an update to people that have previously invested money in the Basin Electric credit. And then finally, we had a meeting with the banks that participate in our revolving credit facility. I'm pleased to report that in that particular meeting, we probably had over 50 people in attendance, and that's important because, again, it shows the interest of the banking group and the investor community in the Basin Electric credit. As we move on to the methodologies and the things that the rating agencies look at, Moody's has 5 specific metrics that they look at, and that comprises 40% of their overall rating. They take a look at such things as times interest earned, your funds from operations to debt, funds from operations to interest, equity to capitalization, and debt service coverage. Right now, one of the key metrics that S&P focuses on is debt service coverage, and then moving to Fitch, they take a look at liquidity and leverage. If you do an overview and pick from each of the agencies, they see our key credit strengths as those long-term wholesale power contracts, and then the creditworthiness of the members that stand behind those contracts. As Paul mentioned earlier in his presentation, we've always said and will continue to say that the linchpin of the Basin Electric credit is the strength of those contracts and the members that stand behind them. They also give us credit for our size and diversity. Size with regard to the geographic footprint that we cover, diversity with regard to our generation mix, be it coal, wind, natural gas, so on and so forth, and then diversity with regard to our customer base, be it farm and residential, industrial, or commercial. We also get credit for having an experienced management team and a very engaged board of directors, and a board of directors that is willing to make the tough decisions and take the tough actions when need be. And finally, we get noted as a credit strength for the strong liquidity and the strength of the banks that back up those liquidity facilities. When you take a look at credit weaknesses, even though we've made great strides over the course of the past several years in adding gas generation, wind generation, and long-term wind PPAs, and in light of the fact that it looks like we're getting some reprieve from the Clean Power Plan, they still continue to note our large carbon footprint as a weakness and something that we may have to address at some time in the future. And then, of course, not surprisingly, they take a look at the weakening of commodity prices and the impact that that's having on our non-utility operations, especially at DGC. A particular transaction that we're working on right now and hope to have completed prior to the end of the year is the merger of the Prairie Wind subsidiaries into Basin Electric. These subsidiaries were established in 2009 and 2010. While there are several reasons and benefits to merging those subsidiaries into Basin Electric, the primary one is we have 2 non-regulated for-profit subsidiaries that we're looking to merge into a regulated not-for-profit entity, and by so doing we'll be able to create a credit to our provision for income tax, which produces a sizable benefit, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. One thing that we've had a lot of discussion on lately in discussions with the membership is what we'll refer to as a revenue deferral or a margin stabilization plan. We kind of use these two terms interchangeably, but in some respects one can say that we could keep them part and parcel from each other. As a result of the 3 mil rate increase that we had in January of last year, followed by the 7 mil rate increase in August, due to very moderate weather and a change in commodity prices, we want to take whatever steps we can that are necessary to preclude from having to do another intra-year rate increase. Given the size of our organization, approximately $7.4 billion in assets and approximately $2 billion in revenue, we, in discussions with the membership, have determined that a margin stabilization plan of somewhere around $75 million, or approximately 3 mils, is prudent. In addition, or in conjunction with that margin stabilization plan, we're also looking to create a deferred revenue pool. This would be used in the event that we have to do an asset impairment of some of our assets at DGC. We'll have more discussion on this topic tomorrow morning during our member strategic direction meeting. So how do we get there? How do we build this revenue deferral, this margin stabilization plan? We currently have $23 million available that is in deferred revenue from prior years. We've talked about that financial forecast and how we've come to the conclusion that we need a consolidated after-tax margin of somewhere in the $75 million range. What you see here in the dark blue are dollar amounts of margin that is available over and above each of those years, over and above that $75 million in each of those years. So in this instance, Our projections show that we would have another $32 million that we could add to our deferred revenue in 2018, another $20 million in 2019, and so on and so forth. Just a couple of minutes ago, I talked about the benefit of merging those Prairie Wind subsidiaries into Basin Electric. If we can get that done prior to the end of the year, that'll be an immediate benefit to our margin of another approximately $69 million. And then if things continue to hold for the remainder of the year as they have up to this point in time, it appears as if there should be margins available this year that we can defer into future years. Our consolidated after-tax margin through September was approximately $130 million. Our projections show that by end of the year that could be in the $140 to $150 million range. So again, if things continue for November and December, we should have sizable dollars available this year that we can defer. Let's now hear from Matt Washburn of Northwest Iowa Power Cooperative on the importance of a margin stabilization plan.
With everything that's in front of us at this point, if we did not do that, because I mean, stable rates is what's imperative to our members. If we did not do that with the challenges that are ahead of us, probably almost be seen as being negligent. So with everything that's in front of us, the challenges that are in front of us, the plan that's coming out, the strategic plan that's coming out, this is going to provide a strong financial basis for our members going forward. It's going to allow for a smoothing of rates. You know, that's the last thing. No one likes cliff events. Nobody likes sharp changes to the rates. And so this margin stabilization plan will allow Basin to smooth that out as we go forward.
We've already had some discussions with the bylaw committee and will continue to have further discussions with the members throughout 2018. But if our plan as envisioned comes together, in all likelihood we'll be back at next year's annual meeting to discuss the removal of the $200 million cap in our current revenue deferral policy. We've discussed this revenue deferral margin stabilization plan with the rating agencies and have gotten very favorable feedback. They definitely see this as a credit strength. Let's now turn our attention to patronage allocation. In March, the Basin Electric allocated nearly $140.8 million to its members. Since 1966, the cooperative has allocated just over $1 billion in capital credits to its members and retired $224.6 million over that same period of time. After a couple of years of being precluded from retiring capital credits due to a covenant in our indenture, which precludes the retirement of patronage if our equity to capitalization rate would be less than 20% after the retirement of any patronage. We now find ourselves in a position to be able to discuss some sort of patronage retirement because as of September 30th, our equity to capitalization ratio was 23.2%. By now, I'm sure most of you have heard, but if not, actually yesterday morning at the board meeting, the board approved retiring the remaining undistributed patronage from the year 2000, or approximately $20.5 million, and nearly $4.5 million from the year 2001 allocation, for a total retirement of $25 million. We'll be looking to do that patronage retirement sometime around the 1st of December. Given the significant drop in commodity prices that started a couple of years ago, we do face some challenges, especially for our non-utility operations. So now more than ever, the strength of the cooperative stands on sticking together and supporting each other. This time, let's hear once again from both Bill and Matt on the importance of the Basin family staying united.
The basis of the cooperative model is people working together for a common goal, and there's always going to be challenges along the way, and just like a family, sometimes you're arguing, sometimes you're getting along, but it's all part of at the end of the day, we're all pointing towards the same direction. I'm a big team-oriented guy. I love sports. I played sports, all that. The biggest part I like about it is that you're part of a team, that you're all pointing in the same direction, trying to accomplish a goal. With the challenges that we have ahead of us right now, probably now more than any time in Basin's history, we need to be on one team, pointing in the same direction, asking the tough questions, making sure that we're doing what's best for our membership, but we have to be a joint, unified team as we go forward here to meet these challenges that are ahead of us.
I think the old saying, if everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction, you're going to be a lot more successful. And I think getting everybody from the distribution co-op to the Class A's to Basin going in the same direction. Once again, I really believe in vertical success for all three tiers of the system. And if we can be working together, strategically working together, understand each other's strategic goals and where we need to go, I think all of us working together is going to provide a much better benefit for the member at the end of the line. And that's really why we go to work every day, is to provide benefits and great service and reliable service and low-cost service to the member at the end of the line.
I told you early on that I was humbled and honored to have the position that I do. I'm equally as humbled and honored to work with a great group of people. The financial services team, be they accounting, finance, insurance, or IS&T, are extremely intelligent, professional, and dedicated. They show up every day with Basin Electric's best interests in their minds and in their hearts. So to each of them, know that I appreciate your efforts, and I thank you for everything you do for Basin Electric. So finally, in closing, once again, as we have for the past several years, in the opinion of management and speaking on behalf of the board, and to reiterate what Paul said earlier, Basin Electric is in sound financial condition, and we're here to meet the needs of you, our members, now and for many years to come.